Okay, the other conversation that we wanted to have today, of course, is about energy. And do we really understand? Do Ghanaians understand when somebody says there's an energy crisis or a power crisis in the country? Do ordinary Ghanaians get it? Firstly, we're finding a bit more about what the situation really means in real terms. But when there's an energy crisis or a power crisis or power looming, what does that mean? Does that mean that all of a sudden my light is going to go off? Or does it mean that we're not going to have enough fuel to run other operations? What does it actually mean? Get some education on that. But Nanea, from what you've been listening or hearing and gossiping about, what have you heard about this whole possibility of an energy crisis? So let's stick to the appropriate language.
Well, I don't know that crisis is I'm not an energy expert, so I'm not sure that I'm qualified to say that what one may be going through, the hiccup one may be going through, or Ghana may be about to go through, is what you would describe as a crisis. The point has been made, as in the last period when we had staggered shutdowns of power, which I believe at the time Ghana Grid Company ascribed to some repair work that was being done on major terminals. And so once the repair work was done, they assured us the lights would come back on normally, and they sort of did. And then they had another period of staggered service where we were getting a lot of power cuts. I remember a period early last year, I think probably around this same time of the year last year, when round here and abouts, right in the centre of Accra, where you normally don't expect power cuts, as a matter of course, we were getting load shedding, it seemed, day after day after day. Our generator was on for weeks on end almost. That was to do that. It was either early last year or the end of 2023. That was before the advent of the gold for oil policy, when we're having a serious problem just covering the cost of our oil imports. So let's say that the energy sector legacy debt, which I believe is now considerably smaller than it was about 8 years ago. But the lingering problem of the energy sector legacy debt and the lingering problem of the efficiency of our power distribution services and our power provision services is a problem, obviously, that has not gone away. It is one of the major things that, in the process of negotiating the extended credit facility with the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, the multilateral institutions are very keen to point out to Ghana as one of the major things that an incoming government in 2025 is going to have to keep its eye on. Whether any incoming government in the current shape has all the tools at its disposal to actually knock this problem on the head for good, not just reduce an energy sector legacy debt, but crack the problem of adequate power provision, efficient power supply, decent electricity prices, but at the same time the management of the finances of our power provision companies and power distribution companies in a way that allows them to operate economically, cover their costs, and not constantly be expecting bailouts from the state. Whether we have the tools within reach at the moment to get to that point, I think most people would doubt. But at the moment, what we have is people anecdotally telling us that the lights have gone off in Kumasi, in Tamale, in various parts of Accra, overnight. Into the morning, they've got up and they've left for work, and the lights still are not on.
I'm thinking one of the biggest challenges, you mentioned it there, but Xtra, the whole thing is that this, again, Nanea is making the point that this is not a crisis. It's just about the way we are managing this sector in terms of we have legacy debt that has to be dealt with. Whatever we do to provide power in this country is not done with any eye on really clearing profit and making sure that we can even do maintenance of our own equipment to a certain extent. so that we're always running at a shortfall of having these periods where now we have to find money from somewhere else, whereas the sector should be able to generate its own enough income to cover its own running costs and maintenance. Now, again, the challenges are always different. There's the problem of maybe at some point is distribution. At another time, it's the gas pipeline is messed up. At another time, this particular moment, we're finding liquid fuel because the gas pipeline will be closed for maintenance. Now, you can't blame the government or anybody for that.
Yeah.
But should we have 90 million sitting around waiting to cover those costs? Is that the way we should be running?
Ideally, if you're running a business, it has to be profitable. It has to be sustainable. So the short answer to that question is that yes, we must and we should. But then it speaks to some of the inefficiencies that we've had in managing the power generation and distribution. Part of the reason being that in spite of all this business of gold for oil and all of these, we are buying the critical component of power generation being the light crude oil and all other fuel in USD, and we're selling power in cedis. And so you, right from the get-go, you're already creating a situation where you're going to chase your costs because your costs are going to build up and you're selling in power, in cedis. Now, your power sales itself, being in cedis, is also to a large extent not being managed well in terms of the collections. So there are people, not every one of us, I think about 40 to 50%, if I'm not mistaken, of us are on prepaid. The rest are on postpaid.
Well, all government ministries are still on
exactly
post.
And they usually are the ones that tend to owe a lot. So we're back to this conversation of ensuring that government pays for the power it uses, so that the power distribution company, ECG, will be able to have the cash it needs
pay GRIDCo.
to pay.
Pay GRIDCo,
you know, and the longer you wait to make some of these payments, the more difficult it becomes, because the US dollar is not going to be waiting for the Ghana cedi to catch up anytime soon. And so you create these problems, layers of problems, and we've not been able to deal with them holistically. And that's probably one of the reasons why we find ourselves where we are now. Again, we haven't looked at the power mix. Okay, I mean, we have abundant sun. Why are we not looking at
other forms
of
fuel,
power,
or power?
You know, to as it were, save us from the headache of a pipeline being shut down for maintenance.
Yeah,
you know, if you have a decent mix of sources. Because at the moment we've got hydro, we've got a little bit of solar. You got hydro, you got thermal, and that's it. Could nuclear be something we should expedite our foray into? What can we do to augment the I mean, you want to run a 24-hour economy, you're going to need deep power. You know, so for me, I think that a more holistic and a bold approach to dealing with the power situation has to be done, and it's got to be both vertical and horizontal, not just investment into new forms of power, but also the efficiency of the institutions that either generate, distribute, or what's the other one?
Distribute what? There's distribution.
There's generation.
Distribution.
Is it? No, that's the third leg.
Supply?
Yeah, supply and distribution. But the GRIDCo, ECG, and the power generators, I think there needs to be a certain level of efficiency.
Go on, Nana, you're going to say.
I was going to say, well, I mean, there are, of course, always the plans. Yes, Ghana does have a renewable energy master plan, and a great deal of work has been.
You're funny.
I'm funny. Well, you may say I'm funny, but actually some serious work has been done towards actually realising the objectives of the master plan, which are to add, I think, at least 2,000 megawatts of solar power to the energy mix by 2030. I mean, I believe this government has the immediate past government moved considerably towards achieving that total with things like the Nadoli Kaleo solar power plant,
Right.
the rooftop power plant in the Tema Free Zones enclave, the Bui, it's partly floating, isn't it? Their solar power plant out there.
It's in the sea somewhere.
Yes.
Go on, sorry.
And so on. There are various number of there was the Punkatamansu renewable energy plant, solar power plant, commissioned just before the election, and so on. These are sort of taking a modular. They're not grand scale projects. They are bolt-ons to meet the particular need in an area. Obviously, if you have a rooftop solar power plant, I believe it's the largest power plant of its kind, solar power plant of its kind anywhere in Africa, in the Free Zones enclave. It is meant to meet the needs of powering the industries in that particular enclave. And we know that some of those are heavy industries with some quite high power usage. So the idea being that if we can't build the large-scale Akosombo type dams that would have been the projects, the infrastructure power projects of the 1940s or 50s, what you can have is a more modular, more decentralized approach to providing certain localized power injections into the power distribution system in particular regions. For that reason, we saw the removal of the Abwadzit thermal power plant from where it was on the coastline up to the Ashanti region to power the northern sector of our country. We keep on talking about the North's potential for industrialization, particularly if you're talking about an incoming government that has ideas of using agriculture as the motor to kickstart the economy again, or give the economy a boost. Well, the North is our breadbasket. If you want to get into food processing on a serious level, we saw the opening of, say, a watermelon juice processing plant in Wale Wale, again just before the election. If you want to run industries on that scale, you need power. If this incoming government of President John Dramani Mahama wants to run its 24-hour economic policy, of course it's going to need the power to keep the factories going 24 hours a day. And so these modular if you like, interventions can go a great deal towards resolving some of the local problems that there are. But the existing inefficiency of the system, the problems of ECG as a distributor, and there have been particular criticisms of ECG as having done a certain amount to improve its revenue collection. Still a lot to be desired because there are large state institutions. We had the former director of ECG, Samuel Dubik Mahama, talking about the large debt owed to ECG by the Ghana Armed Forces. They have problems of revenue collection, and then they have the physical inefficiencies built into the system that Xtra was talking about. The physical work that it will take to cut down on some of those power losses, cut down on the level of power theft from the system. We've been talking about Kantamanto in the past week or so, and the problem of illegal electricity connections.
Well, that's finished now.
They burnt that down, and clearly the people have done nothing in the days since gone by to re-establish the illegal electricity connections. I'm sure it's all above board and kosher now. The theft from the system and the inefficiencies of the system are huge. In order to be able to resolve some of those problems, yes, there's a lot of work to be done by the institutions. There's also a lot of work for us to be done by us as individuals, because it's the ordinary individuals who are asking people to come and link me to this line here or rig this meter up for me so that I don't pay for power.
I would love to say that it's ordinary individuals and wonderful, and that's great, and we all love Ghana, and we all so nationalistic that we wouldn't do the wrong thing. People jump red lights because it's in our nature to jump and to do naughty things.
It's in whose nature?
It's in our nature, human beings, to do illegal things.
Well,
anyway,
I don't drive, so...
Okay, let's find out a bit more. Let's be more educated on this subject. Nanea is going to be speaking to to an energy expert about what's been going on in the sector, and he's in the person of Kwadwo Poku.
Good morning to you, sir. Good morning to you, sir.
Are you speaking to me?
Now we can hear you. Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I can hardly hear you.
Can you hear me a bit more clearly now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I'll try to speak up and let's see if we can persist and this will work. So thank you very much.
I've been speaking to you for almost 3 years. Hasn't the watch changed the accent a little bit?
I'm not quite feeling the full effects of the watch this morning, but I'm sure the situation will improve in the next few minutes, sir. So thank you very much for joining us on the Asaase Breakfast Show. We were asking earlier on in conversation between ourselves, and I would like your opinion on the subject. We're hearing accounts, one of an imminent lack of the fuel resources to drive our power plants in the next few days. The suggestion having been made by John Jinapor that we're about to run out of the fuel we need to keep the lights on. And we're hearing at the same time anecdotal accounts of lights going off across the country. Are we already in the throes of a power crisis, or are we about to face one imminently?
Well, good morning to your listeners, I should say. I think I want to start this conversation by saying that some journalists or journalists in this country should help us to interrogate and educate. Journalism is not just about sensationalism. I think that is where we are heading as a nation, and it's not going to help us. If you see some of these stories that come up, it's mostly a manufacturing of journalists, in the sense that when our brother John Jinapor had that interview at the Independence Square with the Joy News reporter, that reporter would have just spent a few more minutes and interrogated Mr. Jinapor a bit further, so that he or she can educate his listeners or viewers. Unfortunately, that did not happen. And in the effect to create sensationalism, there are some journalists on TV, actually minutes and hours after that interview, were all saying that some people have even called out about their doom. So, meanwhile, when Mr. Jinapor talked about 5 hours of fuel left and the country will go into darkness, it's been 2 days, and there hasn't been a single load management in the country. If your light has gone off within that period, call ECG, it must be a localized fault. As far as I'm concerned, and I've checked every 6 hours with the powers that be to find out if there's any load management, and there isn't any. The reason we're having this conversation is because the journalists who picked up these stories refuse to interrogate and educate. We do not run electricity generation in this country solely by liquid fuel. In part, we don't even use liquid fuel. You use thermal, you use gas, and hydro is water. Now, you've heard about people saying that, we procure some LCO, which is light crude oil, for same power. What you do in your generation mix is that you have some level of liquid fuel as a backup. So in times when maybe your demand that you expect is more, you will now use that liquid fuel, even that about 6 hours during peak hours, you use that. But it's not a constant. It's not something that you are running the country on liquid fuel. The country is not run on generators, where somebody said, when you're leaving the house and I came in, you only left me 5 hours of diesel in the tanks. That's not how the country runs. So let's put that in perspective. And I really don't appreciate how most journalists would, want to make it look like, there is doom so. Look, MPP is no longer in power. I'll be more than happy to join that chorus and say, yes, NDC came in 2 days and there's doom so. But look, and I can't balance, they are buying the bomb and the protection. And they did it to us, and it's now being done to them. But as an energy expert, I would rather put it in perspective that, look, lights don't just go off because there is no liquid fuel. In terms of, there are 2 conversations that have come to clash. One conversation, which you have seen a GRIDCo document, talks about a pegging exercise being undertaken by West African Gas Pipeline. That exercise is to go on from January 20th to February 16th. That we need certain amount of fuel, liquid fuel, to augment the shortage of fuel, thermal gas coming from Nigeria. We have a certain plant in Tema, the Eastern Corridor that use gas coming from Nigeria, and also we do some level of reverse flow from the Takoradi enclave to the Tema enclave. Because of the maintenance pegging exercise being done by WACO, that gas will not be available to the Tema enclave. But you see, this is not the first time that some level of maintenance has happened in the country. There has been various maintenances that happened in the country in the last 8 years. Even last year alone, there were instances where we did not have available to the grid Twin City, which does about 171 megawatts. We didn't have car power. Car power was only doing something like 54 megawatts out of the 450 megawatts. Asaase has shut down in the month of October to November. But we managed the power sector. You know, when people say that, oh, the power sector, you need to manage it. But there's a lot of moving parts. Okay, so you don't just come in and say that, oh, there is no flow and because of that lights are going to go off. No, it means you don't understand the sector. The power sector has a lot of variables and you need to manage it. What amount of gas do I have? Where is my gas coming from? Which gas is not available? What plants can come on instead of that? This issue, which is the January 20th to February 16th conversation, is a unique conversation. It happens once in every 10 years or once in every 5 years. It's not something that's irregular. This exercise has not happened in a very long time. So it is a unique conversation that needs to be had. Yes, they will need some liquid fuel to come in to be able to augment the generation in the Eastern Corridor. And let's not confuse that with the statement made by John Jenapo to say that there was no fuel left because of that we are going to get. So there are two different conversations.
So indeed, as you say, the danger of confusing two issues that very easily get lost in the alarmism of the news headlines and the reaction. Does the suggestion or the intervention by President Mahama to the effect that one of the major things or one of the major components that we're going to have to tackle if we are to come up with a long-term solution for a 21st century Ghana fit to meet our new energy needs is the distribution question and the need for private actors in the distribution sector in particular. Is that a complicating factor unrelated to the current questions being discussed, not the same thing as you point out, or is it crucial and central to the discussion that we should be having at the moment?
Oh, not at all. You see, it's unfortunate, but you see, we went into the 2024 elections with Ghanaians not even listening to the NPP. We went into the 2024 December elections. Ghanaians did not even look at the NPP manifesto. You know, some of us spent hours and days in doing an energy manifesto for a reason, because we understood the problem. We knew the challenges that is coming, and we know that we need to prefer solutions for that problem. So today, if anybody cared to go and read the NPP manifesto on energy, you will see what we have stated. And those things were stated not because we were bored and thought we put a document together. Those things were stated because we knew of a problem and we were preferring solutions to fix them. Nobody listened, nobody read, right? We went and voted the way we thought we should, or stayed at home and said, look, I'm not going to vote because I'm upset. That's fine. That's your choice. But today, what are we faced with? We are faced with a government that is now crying foul to make it look like they didn't know what the problem is or what the problem was. The problem has always been there, if anybody had cared to know. I mean, Honorable John Jenapo has been on TV and radio various times preferring and telling us about what they think the problem is. How come all of a sudden it's an issue? I mean, the privatization of the downstream, which is the last mile of ECG, is nothing new. We did PDS, it did not work. In the MPP manifesto, we talked about the last mile, which is the retail end, trying to now give that to private sector. Nobody listened. So, look, to some people, they just basically think that it's something new that they want to be sensationalized about. But to some of us, we've always talked about, and the reason that we spent hours to put that document for our manifesto and presented it to Ghanaians, and Ghanaians did not look at it, We did not do that out of boredom. We did that because we knew that this is the challenge, this is how to solve it, and let us continue in government to solve it. People felt otherwise, which is fine. The country has voted, let's move on. But the point I'm trying to put a point across is that let's not make it look like these things just befell us all of a sudden. It did not. And if they didn't know and they preached that they could solve it, how can you preach you can solve something you did not know? And clearly they didn't, because if you read the NDC manifesto, it's very shallow on some of these issues. Okay? So look, it's here. Like I said earlier, let's not confuse two conversations. One conversation of an impending maintenance on the West African gas pipeline, which need a certain amount of money, not all the 100 million they are talking about. They need some money, because if you look at the GRIDCo document that was put out there, they gave two scenarios. If I'm in that room and GRIDCo brought me that document, I'll tell GRIDCo that, look, there's a third scenario that is missing, right? Because the assumption that was made was use certain peak demands. That is not realistic. Those peak demands always only happens in December. We are in January and February. What are the peak demands for January and February? You realize that the peak demand for January and February is much lower than the peak demand we are using. Now, if you zero out export, what now is your domestic demand? So if you know your real demand for January, February, and you minus export, you realize that the amount of domestic demand that you need to procure fuel for is not as high as they are making it seem. So you do not need to spend all that money that they claim. That's a conversation for them to interrogate. But let's not confuse the lack of thereof of this so-called no fuel in any of these reserves for power generation. You do not need those reserves. If you optimize your gas flows and you basically manage the sector well, you will not need those reserves flow that they talk about.
So, as the people in charge of the sector, and you pointed to Honourable John Jinapos' own long involvement in discussing matters of this from the opposition benches, and one would have hoped his enlightened view on the on the matters that have to be resolved in order to get the sector back in working order. The immediate scenarios, as you said, proposed by GRIDCo as the solution to what may be the unusual difficulties that we may face because of the dwindling of gas supply, left out the third scenario as set out by the NPP in its manifesto 2024. Over and above the longer-term solutions to do with, for example, expansion of the renewables sector. We were discussing a modular approach earlier on before we began talking to you, and even long-term or larger scale infrastructure, energy infrastructure projects. What would you see as the first lines to be addressed by the new government, the immediate actions to be taken, although I know you, as you say, this is spelt out in the NPP manifesto, but in the patriotic interest, what would you be advising us as a nation to do in the short term?
Well, look, there's only one truth. The energy sector has not been dealt with the way it should have been dealt with in the last 8 years. Some of us have, through my institute, have written various documentation and basically said that ECG by now should be in a much better state than it is. When Honorable Ejako in 2017 had his vetting, talked about 2.4 billion indebtedness, and in his US slang, he says it doesn't cut it, right? And what did we do about it in the last 8 years? Nothing. And some of the things that we said was that when you see that somebody is hemorrhaging, you need to basically stop the hemorrhaging before you fix the wound. Okay, so you need to stop the piling on of debt to be able to fix the indebtedness. We didn't. We tried to fix the indebtedness without basically stopping the piling on of debt, and that continued in 8 years. And we are back to that same situation where the sector is highly challenged and highly indebted. ECG had not optimized recoveries. The commercial losses is gone from anywhere near 26% to more than probably 45% by now, which is huge, inadequate, and it can collapse the system. So not a lot. I wouldn't say nothing was done. Some things were done, but not a lot was done in the last 8 years to really fix the problem. PDS did not happen, but after PDS, we shouldn't have stopped trying to privatize ECG. The private sector participation should have been pushed ahead. It should have happened. If not the entire ECG, the retail end should have happened. That did not happen. Okay, and for me, that's unfortunate. In terms of the gas flow, we knew from all documents that have been put out there, we knew that as we grow generation, we needed more fuel, thermal gas to fuel the generation growth. Ghana grow at an average of about 250 to 300 megawatts a year. Okay? Now, imagine when we came in 2017, we were talking about excess capacity, right? Because there was a lot of power available that we did not need because the NDC government at the time had signed on powers that we didn't use at the time. But guess what? That excess capacity conversation vanished around 2019 because we have grown into the excess that was there. So at post-2020, nobody talked about excess capacity because now, if you look at the document and put out there by GRIDCo, it even tells us that if you look at what our peak is, you factor in your spin capacity, add that together, minus your dependable capacity installed, we need to build more plants in the country. So that, what will fuel your growth? We didn't deal with that. Ghana Gas was to build a second train. That construction of the second train was dubbed in politics, and it was fought over and eventually was given to companies that did not have capacity to build the second train. Up to today, the second train has not been built. So that, again, unfortunate. I mean, spend 8 years not basically improving on the gas infrastructure that we have in the country, and that's the truth, right? Then you come down to investment in infrastructure in transmission. I personally went to Ken Ofori-Atta's office and told him that in the last 7 years, we've not done any investment in transmission. There was some money that GRIDCo was looking for, about $60 million. GRIDCo has been chasing. They got a facility from the ECOWAS Bank, right, through the Indian Xtra. They gave a facility to GRIDCo to basically build some transformers in Takoradi and improve some of the infrastructure in Chibi and some parts of the country. Ken Ofori-Atta did not do it. And I'm putting this on record. I went to his office personally to beg him to do it. He didn't do it. After I speak to you today, that transaction was never done. So in terms of transmission, we did not do any major transmission improvement of the facility in the last 8 years. Very unfortunate. Okay? Now, if you look at the overall, now you talk of aging infrastructure. Yes, we need to improve some of these infrastructure year on year. It wasn't done. So the transmission losses have improved. The distribution losses has improved. So what this government needs to do is to basically go back to square one. What are the low-hanging fruit for them? Optimize gas flows. Okay, what are the gas flows that they need? Maybe have to talk to Nigeria and gas to get more gas. Look at how they can quickly abrogate the contract given to non-performing contracts that were given to those companies that can't perform on it, and basically award it to a company that can easily come in within the next 18 months and get it done. Those are the things that they can do. Aside that, we just have to manage the sector they have. It's not that bad in terms of the generation, right? But in terms of the recovery of the money, if by producing something, when it goes onto the market, the money that comes back doesn't take care of the full payments. People talk about the cash waterfall. Cash waterfall only distributes what is put in there. ECG will tell you that they only got X amount, and that's what goes into the cash waterfall. So those are the challenges. For me, I think that something drastic needs to be done about ECG immediately to find out what their real recoveries and their real income is, because I don't believe the amount they tell us. I've never believed it, and I've always said that, look, what ECG collects, I think they collect more than they declare. And that is something the new government should look at and see how they can optimize the recoveries from ECG and then basically move it from there.
Is a key candidate then for privatisation the revenue services, the revenue departments of ECG, the recovery side of the business?
Say that again?
Is a key candidate for privatisation then, or invitation of private interest, the recovery and revenue generation, the collection side of the electricity?
No, that's the retail market, which is what I talked of, the last mile. So the retail end of ECG, basically what it is that you have what is called boundary metering. Okay, so for boundary metering, ECG is split into two. So the customer service and then the metering and where the money is collected is given out to private sector. ECG as a concessionaire, which basically holds the power purchase agreement, give a private sector, let's say you are giving concession A, which is the whole of, let's say, the eastern part of Accra. ECG gives you our worth 1,000 cities. They don't want Eastern, but they just want 1,000 cities back. So you, the concessionaire, you have to optimize and make sure that all the metering is done, all the connections are not illegal, so that you're able to recover the money that ECG gave you.
Sure.
I hope you understand
Sure.
what I'm driving at.
Sure.
So you leave the customer service and the billing to a private company.
Okay.
Okay, and if you do that, ECG, who owns the power purchase agreement, will be able to now go after these private concessionaires and basically retrieve the money and pay the power purchase company, the IPPs, who generate these electricity. Now, the two is in one. Okay, ECG collects the money, and then basically we don't even know how much they really collect.
So I think we're in agreement that you're suggesting that there's a possibility of intervention there. Kwadwo Poku, any final words?
You call me Kwesi Poku.
Sorry, Kwadwo Poku, not Kwesi, definitely not Kwesi. Kwadwo Poku, any final words that you would like to offer to? We still don't know who the Minister of Energy is going to be, but whoever is going to come in and be responsible for the sector.
I think we should. I mean, I have said on some other platforms this morning that, there's a lot of expertise in the sector. We should really stop the politics, because I've always said that when it comes to the energy sector, the one thing I don't do is politics in the energy sector. A lot of people that have known me knows that, look, I have an institute and I'm very passionate about the energy sector. If they want to basically have some of us come around the table and basically tell them how certain things are done and advise, not to basically lecture them on what to do, but we can always advise. There's a lot of civil society institutions in the country. I know they are talking about having a forum, but those are like long-term or 120 days or whatever. But immediately when you are calling people to the room to discuss some of these things, I think they should start having the civil society engagement as well, so that some of us can also be able to tell them. I mean, the party lines should be blurred at this point, and let's look at Ghana to move forward.
Thank you very much, Kwadwo Poku, for those words of advice. Thank you for joining us on the Asaase Breakfast Show.
Thank you.